The fear didn't come suddenly. It crept into her life slowly and quietly, taking root not in her mind, but in her legs. It began with a slight hesitation before stepping off a curb. Then came the habit of gripping the handrail on the stairs more tightly. For Helen, who had recently turned 70, the world began to shrink, and not because she was getting old, but because her own legs, once reliable and strong, were becoming a foreign, unpredictable territory. She had loved movement all her life, long walks in the garden, shopping trips, bus rides to the other side of town to visit a friend. Now, every step required thought and concentration. Her legs became heavy, as if filled with lead. Sometimes, when getting up from a chair, she felt a deep, dull ache in the bones of her thighs and shins, as if they were sore from exhaustion, even though she had done nothing. "It's just old age," she told herself with a sigh, declining a friend's invitation to walk in the park. This is what 70 feels like. She had resigned herself to this new condition. She accepted it as the inevitable price for a long life. The staircase to her second-floor bedroom became her personal Everest, which she conquered once a day in the evening, slowly and carefully, and descended in the morning, clinging to the railing. Her beautiful garden outside the window was more and more often left unattended. The thought of bending, squatting, carrying a watering can provoked not just fatigue, but fear. The fear that her legs wouldn't hold her, that she would fall and be unable to get back up. The final straw was an incident in the kitchen. She reached for a tin of tea on the top shelf, lost her balance for a moment, and the world tilted. She managed to grab the edge of the countertop, but her heart pounded in her chest with terror. She hadn't fallen, but she vividly imagined how it could have happened. A broken hip, the hospital, helplessness. That sharp, chilling picture was more terrifying than the aching in her bones. That same day, she made a doctor's appointment. In the office, feeling a little ashamed of her weakness, she described her feelings to the doctor. "I'm just falling apart, doctor. My legs don't obey me anymore. My bones ache. I guess this is it." The doctor, an elderly man with kind and very attentive eyes, listened to her without interrupting. He didn't say the standard phrase, "What do you expect at your age?" Instead, he asked an unexpected question. "Helen, tell me, how often do you get out in the sun? Do you go for walks?" Helen was taken aback. "Well, lately I hardly go out at all. My legs are weak. I'm afraid of falling." The doctor nodded understandingly. "I believe we are dealing not with age itself, but with a very cunning and invisible thief that is stealing your strength, and its name is vitamin D deficiency." He explained to her something she had never considered. We've all heard that vitamin D is necessary for bones, to keep them strong and prevent fractures. But science has moved forward. It turns out that receptors for this vitamin are found all over our bodies, and there are especially many of them in muscle tissue. Vitamin D is not just a building material. It is an electrical signal that makes muscles contract properly to be strong and resilient. Imagine, the doctor said, that your muscles are a powerful engine, and vitamin D is the spark plug. Without a spark, even the best engine won't start. Your weakness in the legs, that leaden heaviness, this is a classic sign that the muscles lack the spark to work at full capacity. And the aching in your bones is what's called osteomalacia, a softening of them, also caused by its deficiency. He told her that this deficiency is extremely common in older adults. With age, the skin's ability to produce vitamin D from sunlight becomes less efficient. People spend more time indoors, and getting enough of it from food is almost impossible. A blood test confirmed the doctor's suspicion. Helen's vitamin D level was critically low. She was prescribed a therapeutic dose of the vitamin and advised to spend 15 to 20 minutes. Every day there was sun on her balcony or just sitting by an open window, exposing her arms and face to the rays. The changes were not instantaneous, but after a month, Helen noticed that the ache in her bones had become quieter. A month later, she was surprised to realize she had come down the stairs in the morning without holding onto the railing. The leaden heaviness in her legs began to recede. One clear summer day, she went out into her neglected garden. She took a small trowel and, for the first time in a long time, squatted down by her rose bush without fear. Her legs held her firmly and confidently. At that moment, she understood that the thief, who had stolen a whole year of her life, had been defeated. And that thief was not old age. It was simply a lack of sunlight, which could be replenished. She had regained trust in her own body, and her world began to expand once again. For some, the night is a time for rest and recovery. But for George, at 75, the night had turned into a battlefield. Every night, without warning, a silent and ruthless enemy would attack. An enemy that turned his own muscles against him and stole the peace he so desperately needed. That enemy was nocturnal leg cramps. It wasn't just a slight spasm. It was a sudden, violent pain that would rip him from the deepest sleep. A muscle in his calf or foot would suddenly, on its own, twist into a rock-hard, vibrating knot. The pain was so sharp, it would take his breath away, and he couldn't suppress a groan. A well-practiced ritual would begin. He would throw off the blanket, jump out of bed, and, limping, try to stand on the cold floor to stretch the cramped muscle. Sometimes, in desperation, he would pound it with his fist, trying to force it to relax. The attack could last from 30 seconds to several agonizing minutes. But afterward, George would lie awake for a long time, his heart pounding, listening to the silence of the house. And this happened almost every night, sometimes multiple times a night. He felt the consequences the entire next day. Due to chronic sleep deprivation, he was exhausted and apathetic. But the worst part was his legs. The muscles constantly ached, as if he had run a marathon the day before. They were tense, knotted, and weak. It became difficult for him to go on his usual walks because his legs would tire quickly and start to ache. He had tried every folk remedy he had ever heard of. He ate bananas, thinking he was low on potassium. He drank bitter tonic water before bed because someone told him the quinine helped. He stretched, wore woolen socks. Sometimes there would be temporary relief for a night or two, but then the relentless enemy would return. George began to lose hope, attributing this to just old age. The turning point came in the doctor's office, where he had gone for a routine checkup for his blood pressure. As the doctor was finishing the appointment, he asked the standard question, "Is there anything else bothering you, George?" On a whim, George hesitated. He didn't want to complain about what seemed to him an inevitable part of aging. But fatigue and desperation won out. "Oh, it's nothing major, doctor," he said. "Just these blasted leg cramps at night. But I suppose there's nothing to be done about that." The doctor, instead of nodding in agreement, put down his notes and looked at George with interest. "That's not nothing, George. And it's certainly not a mandatory part of aging. That's a classic distress signal from your body. Tell me more." After listening to George's story of nocturnal torment, the doctor said, "It sounds like the second invisible thief stealing your strength and your sleep is a magnesium deficiency." He explained it with a simple analogy. Imagine your muscles have two buttons, on and off. The mineral responsible for the on button, for muscle contraction, is calcium. But the mineral for the off button, for relaxation, is magnesium. When your body is low on magnesium, the off button starts to stick. The muscle gets the command to contract, but it can't get the clear command to release. It stays in that tense, contracted state. That's your cramp. The doctor explained that magnesium deficiency is an incredibly common problem. Modern processed foods lose most of this mineral. Even fruits and vegetables contain less of it than 50 years ago due to soil depletion. Furthermore, some common medications, like the diuretics for blood pressure that George was taking, literally flush magnesium out of the body. Instead of immediately prescribing pills, the doctor gave George a handout. It was a list of foods rich in magnesium: spinach and other dark leafy greens, almonds, pumpkin seeds, avocados, black beans, and even dark chocolate. "Let's try to solve this with food first," he said. "Start adding these foods to your diet every day. Let's see what changes in a couple of weeks." George was skeptical, but decided to give it a try. He started adding spinach to his morning omelet. Instead of cookies with his tea, he had a handful of almonds. He began to cook beans for dinner more often. The first week didn't bring much change, but in the second week, he suddenly realized he'd had 2 peaceful nights in a row. Then 3. A month later, waking up one morning feeling refreshed and rested, he realized he couldn't remember the last time he had jumped out of bed in pain. The nightly attacks had stopped. The battlefield had once again become a quiet haven for sleep. His legs felt different during the day, too. The constant, painful tightness was gone. They felt lighter, more supple, and resilient. George began to enjoy his walks again. He understood that the cruel thief that had stolen his sleep and strength for years had been vanquished. And this victory did not require expensive medications. It only required bringing the forgotten mineral back into his life. By restoring this simple balance, George didn't just cure his cramps. He reclaimed his nights, and with them, the energy and joy for his days. Weakness in the legs comes in many forms. Sometimes it's a heaviness in the muscles or an ache in the bones. And sometimes it announces itself with a quiet, strange whisper, a light tingling under the skin, a phantom sensation of hundreds of ants marching where there are none. For Maria, at 78, this whisper was gradually growing into a frightening roar, making her doubt her own sense of touch and her every step. Maria had always been proud of her gait, light, graceful, almost like a dance. She never shuffled or stooped. But over the last 6 months, something had changed. It started with her feet. A strange, constant sensation settled in them, as if they had fallen asleep. The familiar tingling of pins and needles that usually passes in a minute would last for hours and then eventually became permanent. At night, this sensation intensified, turning into a nagging buzzing that kept her from sleeping. Then came the numbness. Her feet, and then her ankles, felt as if they were wrapped in a thick layer of cotton. She stopped feeling the texture of surfaces. Walking barefoot on the soft carpet in her bedroom, she knew in her mind that it was soft, but her feet didn't feel it. They only felt a dull pressure, as if she were walking on thick cardboard. This loss of sensation led to the most frightening thing, a loss of balance. She began to trip over nothing, her brain not receiving clear signals from her feet about her body's position in space began to sound the alarm. She started walking slowly, uncertainly, with her feet wide apart to gain more stability. Her light gait was replaced by the heavy, shuffling walk of an elderly woman she never wanted to become. The walls and furniture in her apartment transformed from interior items into vital supports that she clung to as she moved from room to room. But the most agonizing part was the fear. What was it? The after effects of an old injury? A pinched nerve? Or something far more sinister? Multiple sclerosis? Diabetic neuropathy? A tumor? These thoughts swirled in her head, but she told no one about her symptoms, not wanting to worry her children and grandchildren. She suffered in silence, alone, feeling her own body betray her. One morning she was walking to the kitchen to make coffee. She was lost in thought, and for a second forgot the need to constantly control every step. Her foot caught on the completely flat floor. She pitched forward and would have fallen if not for the table she managed to brace herself against. The moment sobered her. She stood there, clinging to the tabletop, her body trembling not from weakness, but from the realization of how fragile her balance had become. She knew she could no longer ignore it. In the doctor's office, finally, with tears in her eyes, she told him everything. The tingling, the numbness, the constant fear. The doctor listened very attentively, asked clarifying questions, and then said words that Maria would remember for the rest of her life. Maria, what you are describing is not a sentence. It's not a mysterious disease. It is a cry for help from your nerves. He explained to her that the third invisible thief, stealing her confidence, was a vitamin B12 deficiency. Imagine that the nerves in your legs are highly complex electrical wires running from the power station in your brain to the light bulbs in your feet, he said. And vitamin B12 is the material for the insulation that covers each of these wires. This insulation is called the myelin sheath. When the body is deficient in B12, this insulation starts to thin and tear. The electrical signals begin to short-circuit, become distorted, or fail to get through at all. Your tingling is a short circuit. The numbness is a broken wire. The signal isn't arriving, and your instability is the result of the power station in your brain not getting feedback from the light bulbs in your feet about what they are standing on. The doctor explained to Maria that this problem is very common in older adults, and it's often not about diet. With age, the stomach begins to produce less acid and a special protein necessary to absorb vitamin B12 from food. So you can eat enough meat or fish, but your body simply can't extract this crucial vitamin from them. A blood test confirmed the diagnosis. Since the problem was with absorption, Maria was prescribed a course of B12 injections to deliver the vitamin directly into her bloodstream, bypassing the faulty mechanism in her stomach. The changes were not immediate. Nerve tissue recovers slowly. But after a few weeks, Maria noticed that the nagging buzzing in her feet had become quieter. A month later, she was surprised to feel the fibers of her carpet pleasantly tickling her feet. The numbness was receding. With a return of sensation, came the return of confidence. She stopped shuffling. She began to let go of the walls. One day, walking down the hallway, she caught her reflection in the mirror and saw the old Maria with a straight back and a light, fluid gait. She could feel the ground beneath her feet again. The invisible thief that had tried to cut her off from the world had been banished. Her story showed that the health of our legs depends not only on muscles and bones, but on the invisible web of nerves that need their own special nourishment. By restoring the spark to her nerves, Maria didn't just regain her balance, she regained her peace of mind. For Robert, retirement was supposed to be the beginning of a new life, not its decline. At 68, he was full of plans. Finish the porch, go fishing with his wife, and finally clear out the old shed. He had worked a physical job his whole life, and his body, strong and resilient, had always been his faithful tool. But now that he had the time to enjoy his freedom, that tool began to fail him. And the thief he was facing was particularly cunning. It didn't steal his sleep or his peace. It stole his very substance. Robert hadn't become less active. He gardened, walked the dog, and was constantly tinkering with something. But he noticed a change in the mirror with growing alarm. His legs, once his pride, strong, muscular, were getting thinner. The pants that had fit snugly just a year ago were now loose on his hips. This wasn't just losing weight, it was withering. He was losing muscle mass, and it was visible to the naked eye. Along with the volume, the strength was also disappearing. The bag of garden soil that he used to easily throw over his shoulder now felt impossibly heavy. Climbing a stepladder to fix the shed roof, he could feel his legs tremble, lacking their former stability. The power he had always relied on was gone. He was bewildered. He was eating as usual, he wasn't sick, and he was leading an active lifestyle. So why was he wasting away before his eyes? His biggest fear, which he didn't even voice to his wife, was that it was a sign of some hidden, terrible disease. The humiliating moment of truth came when he offered to help a neighbor move a new dresser. Robert took his end, strained, but could only lift it slightly off the ground. His legs were shaking, and there was no pull in his muscles. The young neighbor, seeing his face flushed red from the effort, silently took on most of the weight. That moment, filled with awkward silence, was the last straw for Robert. He knew he had to find out what was happening to him. In the doctor's office, he haltingly explained his problem, emphasizing most of all that he could see his muscles disappearing. The doctor listened, conducted an examination, and said, "Robert, what you're describing has a scientific name: sarcopenia. Simply put, it's age-related muscle loss. It's a natural process that begins for everyone after age 40 or 50. But for you, it's happening too quickly. And I'm almost certain I know why. Tell me, what do you typically eat throughout the day?" Robert described his typical menu. In the morning, toast with jam and coffee. For lunch, a bowl of soup or a cheese sandwich. And for dinner, a normal, complete meal that his wife cooked. The doctor nodded. And there we have found our thief. It's not a disease, it's protein starvation. Robert was stunned. "Doctor, but I'm not starving. I eat 3 times a day, just like I have my whole life." "Exactly," the doctor replied. "You eat like you have your whole life. But your body at 68 has completely different needs. There's a huge myth that older people need less food, including protein. But the truth is the exact opposite. As we age, Our bodies become less efficient at processing protein and building muscle. Just to maintain the muscle mass you have, you now need to eat significantly more protein than you did at 30. Your muscles are in a constant state of breakdown and repair. But by eating almost nothing but carbohydrates for breakfast and lunch, you're not giving them the building blocks to repair themselves. You're essentially starving your muscles until dinner time. And during that time, the breakdown process outpaces the building process. That's why they're wasting away. It was a revelation. Robert had never thought about food in that way. He had always believed that if he didn't feel hungry, everything was fine. The doctor gave him simple and clear recommendations. Every meal must include a source of protein, not just dinner, but every single one. In the morning, a couple of eggs, or a bowl of Greek yogurt instead of toast with jam. For lunch, a large salad with chicken breast, or a can of tuna with his soup. For dinner, his usual portion of meat or fish. And even before bed, a glass of milk or some cottage cheese. Robert treated this as a new work project. He started reading labels, planning his meals. It was unusual at first, but he was determined, and the result was not long in coming. After just a month, he felt that his legs had regained their former fullness. After 2 months, while working in the garden, he playfully lifted the same bag of soil that had seemed so heavy. He felt strong again. But most importantly, he saw it in the mirror. The withering process had stopped. His legs had definition again and looked strong. He stood in his shed, confidently holding a heavy saw. The invisible thief that had been stealing his muscles had been defeated. And that thief was a simple misunderstanding of his body's new needs. Robert learned the main lesson. Retirement is not a time to relax about nutrition. It's a time to become more attentive to it. The building blocks for strong legs and a confident future were no secret. They were waiting for him on his own plate. For Linda, at 73, the day was split into 2 parts. There was the morning, when she felt clear, collected, and full of energy. And then there was the afternoon, when, usually around 2 or 3 o'clock, a thick, invisible fog would descend upon her. This fog brought not sleepiness, but a deep, all-encompassing exhaustion. Her body would become listless, and her legs weak and unresponsive, as if they were made of cotton. Linda was a calm and sensible person. She enjoyed reading and needlework. In the morning, she could get all her housework done, go to the store. But after lunch, her battery seemed to die. The muscles in her legs lost all their tone. The thought of going for a short walk seemed impossible. She often canceled plans with friends scheduled for the afternoon, citing fatigue. "I just need more rest," she told herself. "I need to conserve my energy." She didn't think she drank too little. A cup of coffee in the morning, a cup of tea at lunch, another in the evening. She almost never drank plain water. "I just don't feel thirsty," she would explain if someone offered her a glass of water. Besides, she didn't want to be running to the bathroom all the time. She was convinced that the liquid she got from tea and soup was quite enough for her body. She didn't know that this conviction was slowly and systematically dehydrating her. The climax came on a warm spring day. Linda went out onto her small balcony to repot some flowers. The work was light, but after half an hour, she felt a little dizzy and weak. She attributed it to the stuffiness and decided to go inside. She took a step towards the door, stood up, and at that moment, the world went black. The next thing she knew, She saw her neighbor's frightened face leaning over her. She was lying on the balcony floor next to an overturned flower pot. She had fainted at the hospital after she was revived and tests were run. A doctor came to her. "Linda, you fainted from severe dehydration," he said. "I want to explain why this happened because it's one of the most common and dangerous traps for people your age." He told her that the fifth and perhaps most fundamental thief that steals our energy is chronic lack of fluids. The biggest deception, the doctor said, is that as we age, our brain's ability to recognize thirst signals begins to fade. The thirst center atrophies. You can be severely dehydrated, but not feel thirsty at all. You can no longer trust that feeling. You have to drink water on a schedule, not based on desire. He then explained how this was connected to her weak legs and fatigue. Imagine your muscles are like little hydroelectric power plants. To generate energy, they need water. When fluid is lacking, the water level in the reservoir drops, and the plants can't operate at full capacity. The muscles become weak, sluggish, and inefficient. Your afternoon fog wasn't a sign of tiredness. It was a sign that your power plants were running out of fuel, water. But that wasn't all. Water is important, but electrolytes are just as important, the doctor continued, especially potassium. Potassium is the gatekeeper that opens the doors to the muscle cells to let water and nutrients in. If you're low on potassium, you can drink water, but it won't get to where it's needed most effectively. It will just pass through in transit. And we get most of our potassium from fruits and vegetables, which many older people don't eat enough of. Linda was given a simple but strict plan. Not just drink more water, but a specific goal, 1.5 liters of pure water a day. She was advised to buy a large, beautiful bottle, fill it in the morning, and keep it in sight to sip from throughout the day. She was also given a list of potassium-rich foods: bananas, oranges, baked potatoes, spinach, dried apricots, beans. Linda took this very seriously. The water bottle became her constant companion. She started eating a banana for breakfast and a baked potato in its skin for dinner. The effect was astonishing and almost immediate. Within a week, she noticed that the afternoon fog had lifted. She no longer had that sharp drop in energy. She was alert from morning until evening. Her legs, they felt completely different. They were firm, strong, and resilient. A month later, she was happily walking in the park in the afternoon, something that had seemed impossible to her just recently. She took a sip of water from her bottle and smiled. The last invisible thief, which had turned her days into an endurance test, had been defeated. And that thief wasn't a complex disease, but the simplest, most basic need of her body, which she had been ignoring. Linda's story completes our narrative, showing that the foundation of our strength lies not only in rare vitamins or minerals, but in the very element that makes up most of our bodies. All 5 stories of Helen, George, Maria, Robert, and Linda teach us one thing. Old age is not a diagnosis or a sentence of weakness. It is a time that demands greater wisdom and attention to ourselves. By listening to our bodies and understanding their new needs, we can unmask the invisible thieves and reclaim the strength that is rightfully ours.